Yes, I am. I'm sporting a onesie today, which has a very cool feature, which allows me to just like, if I'm experiencing intense sensory overload, just like zip it up, and I'm gone. Alright, so enough clowning, games and all that. I had a Beats knockoff, nice. Enough of the games, let's get into watching our first video. We'll go for... We'll go for the PDA one first, you know. I feel like that would be a cool one to start off with. I'm always really interested in hearing people's perspectives on things that I also really find enjoyable to delve into. So let's go for it. Let's go for Paige's video. This is PDA Autism Explained, a closer look at pathological demand avoidance, and you will see that there is some whatever you call them. God, they've got the the finger quotes kind of action going on, and I'm sure they will expand on the reasons to that in the video.
Maybe create YouTube videos on TikTok and just edit as I'm going. The problem is it can only be 10-minute videos, but let's fucking try it. I like this way better. Hey, what's up? What's going on? Welcome. This is my first ever YouTube on TikTok. I'm gonna have to flip this so my face looks like normal in person, or else it's too weird. Do you like my half-painted wall? Me 3. It looks cooler over here, but okay, not that much cooler. Anyway.
I did notice the expletives. I try as much as possible to not have them, but seems like Paige is very, very happy to be doing so. I mean, all the power, you know.
I wanted to talk today about PDA autism because I've been saying it a lot and saying the words out loud a lot and not really saying much about what it is because I've just gone over it so much. Once I explain this, you guys will understand so much about me and why I am the way that I am. Maybe a lot about yourself too, because bro, a lot of us might fit this profile. I know I do. That's why I'm saying it. PDA, you're thinking public displays of affection, nay. So it's not a
That's the most common like thing that I hear when I talk about PDA. They're like, oh, okay, so you really like public displays of affection. No, it at its basics, PDA is like not liking being told what to do, basically. But the thing that people get wrong about PDA is that they think it's kind of this like display of dominance or control over people. It's mostly down to the expectations that people put on us. So like if you have a PDA profile, you can find the expectations that people have or put onto you. Very, very difficult. Come on, Paige, let us know what it is. Go for it.
Not a diagnosis, but it's called pathological demand avoidance. It's more so called by the community persistent drive for autonomy because demand avoidance makes it kind of like seem like something that it's not really. Avoiding demands is a core part of it, but that's just what it looks like on the outside. So persistent drive for autonomy, PDA, is a profile of autism. So that means that it's like a autistic people, like some people can be like this kind of autistic. And autistic PDAers have an intense drive to be autonomous, always. I don't just mean intense drive. I mean like it is built into our DNA and it is actively what drives us in everything we do. When I perceive a demand...
I feel like this is very sort of... I don't know. I'm struggling to like get what they're putting across. I don't know what their pronouns are. So I'm just wanting to not mispronoun, whatever you call it, misgender. That's the word. But yeah, it's persistent drive for autonomy is kind of like it's a good way of explaining it a little bit more. I think whenever you get any kind of diagnosis in the medical systems, it's always going to be perceived as something negative, which is just kind of inherent to our sort of medical model when it comes to disability. Some places it's a very, very applicable, like with like infectious diseases and things like that. But when it comes to stuff that's to do with like the brain, it's a little bit more nuanced. I think a lot of people do perceive PDA individuals as just being like unnecessarily difficult about things. I experience PDA quite a bit. It's not really something that happened to me a lot in childhood, and I think that's a lot to do with like the communication style that my mum had. She's very kind of soft and leading, rather than sort of demanding and authoritarian with a sort of parenting style. But the weird thing is that I have the idea in my head is that I know what it feels like to be sort of demanded, or someone tell me to do something, and so I don't particularly want to do that to another person, even if it's right, or even if I was like leading on a project. I still feel like very uncomfortable with like asking people to do things and telling people to do things. So it kind of goes both ways with me. It's not necessarily like this wholly kind of outward experience. A lot of it is internal. And in adulthood, it does look a bit different. So like I have limits, you know, if someone's going to flat out like tell me what to do, I find that very difficult. If someone asks me to do something, it's a little bit more kind of, my brain accepts it a little bit more. But if that's like constant and it's relentless, and I feel like there's a lot of expectations put on me, I can definitely find it difficult to sort of fulfill those expectations. But it's very dependent on other factors as well, I would say.
And when I perceive like someone is trying to control me, or in a weird way, I'm not autonomous, I'm not 100% making my own decision. If it's not fair, if it just like it doesn't make sense because it's not fair. My nervous system goes into fight, flight, freeze, the same as it would if I were fighting a tiger in front of me. What that means is in those cases, when I lose control or have to give into a demand, which a lot can be a demand, my nervous system works into keeping me safe, and so I lose access to my thinking brain and my frontal lobe, and I go into my fight, flight, freeze, survival monkey brain. And if I'm past a certain threshold, then I will melt down or shut down. Some PDAers are more internal with their reactions and how they handle control and demands, and some are more external. It's usually easy.
I'm definitely a lot more internal. I've never had like specific like outbursts of anger or negative emotion towards demands. It's more of being like, okay, I don't particularly like the amount of demands that this person's giving me. I'm going to try and avoid them. I've had a lot of situations in my life where someone's been very like aggressively like trying to tell me what to do, and I've just been the most difficult person in the world. And to be honest, like I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing always. You know, sometimes being a bit more assertive with the way that you want to do things or the way that you think about things can be good. It's very dependent, obviously, like on the situation.
It's easier to spot with a PDAer who is more external because they're more likely to say no when they have a demand, or scream and punch or bite you, or just like growl and run away. Sometimes the nervous system says fight. We're not doing it. Sometimes the nervous system says flight, run away, or distract them, or get onto a different topic, or figure out a way around it, cancel the plans, figure it out, you're not doing it.
I would say that's more along the lines of fawning. I'd say the flight is literally like you're just removing yourself from the situation. There's another one. There's fight. There's freeze. Yeah, as well. I think the freeze and the sort of the outward expression hits me a lot more. Like I will very much just be like a rock, where in the face of demands that are a little bit too much for me, rather than sort of outwardly like being assertive. But the thing is that I haven't really had many situations like that. I have had a couple of situations like that. As I said, like I would just be very, very kind of stoic in my thoughts and just very dismissive, and just like basically I had this situation where I had to tell this person, I think about 30 times, that I wasn't going to do something that they told me to do. Like I was just like, no, it's not happening. Javada D says, my 9-year-old has crippling PDA and other anxiety. Absolutely any demand will cause him to completely shut down. Even for things he wants to do, he clams up with every demand. Yeah, I've taught kids who are PDA as well when I was a special needs teaching assistant. So supported's probably the better word for it. Yeah, it can be quite difficult, and when we're younger, it can be, you can sort of morph your language a little bit more. So if you wanted them to do something, you'd say like, oh, I'm thinking that I want to do some, I want to do some maths. I'm not very good at maths. Could you help me? Or like just saying it out, just saying, oh, I'm really struggling with this. And so it's like a little bit more sensitive to someone with PDA. In adulthood, you can it's very tough, like to soften things, and there's sometimes just no way around it, because obviously we're adults, we understand like the context of communication a little bit better. If someone says like, oh, I really need some help with this, you're like, I know that you're asking me to do something. So it's a bit harder to disguise demands in adulthood, I would say. Can you explain demand avoidance with life-specific situations? Sure. So you have quite an authoritarian style boss who likes to tell people what to do. They say, Matthias, you need to get this paper done by this time today. And they say, and they keep giving stuff every day that you go and talk to them. They say, do this, do this, do this. They say, nope, not like that, do it like this. A PDA individual would have a very, very difficult time, like just taking that on board and just rolling with it and just saying like, okay, my boss is a bit like pointy, like telling me what to do. I can deal with that. They're my boss. I can just get the job done. If you're PDA, you might say like, no, I want to do it this way. Or say, no, I actually don't want to do that today. Like, or just freeze and just not do it. Or like call in sick at work in terms of like fleeing the situation. Just saying that you're feeling really sick and you need to go home. So those would kind of be, I guess, some more of a practical example of what PDA might look like in the workplace. I think that the interesting part of PDA is when you mix relationships into the mix of that. Because you can imagine if you are in a partnership with somebody, they tell you to do things or they ask you to do things and they don't soften it, and both parties don't even know what PDA is, or even that one of them might be autistic. So there's a lot of different ways that it can manifest. I feel like I need to watch a little bit more of Paige's video, because I'm definitely going off on one, I think. That's exactly what I do. Or instead of saying get your shoes on, I say you will need shoes. You might need shoes to go outside.
Or also freeze. Bringing it all into your head. Dissociating. Not being able to do anything or go anywhere. And I think this is where I fall in a lot, and when I do, I become just autistically inert. Now, a lot of times when I talk about PDA, people are like, that sounds like it could be a lot of other things. Sounds like oppositional defiant disorder. Well, it's not. That sounds like, just being a human person. Well, it's not. That sounds like you just like are normal. No one likes being told what to do. Well, it's not like that. Personally, it's fucked. I'm only just now learning about PDA and me and how it impacts and affects me today. But it impacted me and affected me since I was little, just in different ways. I always say it was so hard to be a kid. And I always felt like one of the reasons why it was so hard is because I knew nothing and could not make any decisions. And I had to trust the people around me to make the decisions for me. And I didn't trust them. So I had to be controlled. I couldn't be autonomous. I had no...
I think that's might be a little bit of a difference to why like maybe my PDA wasn't too bad, because definitely like my parents' sort of styles of parenting, perhaps more so on my mum's side, less on my dad's side, tended to be a little bit softer, a little bit more sensitive to the PDA profile, maybe just naturally.
No choice, and that sucked. As soon as I could speak, I was trying to pick my own outfits, which isn't fun. I don't want to do that. I was very bossy, and I would tell my parents that they were playing with... By parents, I mean my mom maybe 1 or 2 times. And then I was like, you're playing wrong. She's like, okay, I'm not playing with you then. Fuck off. Pro tip, please play with your PDA child. Play is actually like a very important thing to do with your child, with your PDA child. For some context and some clarity, let's go over what some demands are or can look like. They're going to change.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not like advisable if you have a PDA child to like not interact with them. You've got to at some point like help them understand at some point in their sort of journey in life, help them understand that sometimes people are going to tell you what to do and how to manage that yourself. Just bringing a bit of reality into it, I suppose. But yeah, it's not playing with them. Like, there's an important aspect of sharing, and like play is that it's not supposed to be controlled by one person, you know. And so if you manage to do some kind of more of an imaginative play as a child, I feel like you're a bit more open in terms of like taking on board what people's expectations are. That's just my thoughts on it. But let's have a look at some of the demands that they get on Paige's nerves.
Change and vary person to person, and also mindset to mindset. Anything that is not spontaneous right now, me deciding it in the moment, anything that is pre-planned feels like I have to do it, which feels like a demand and feels like not autonomy. Anything that I have to do is a demand. Or anything that I think anyone is trying to make it so I try to feel like I have to do it, demand. My parents telling me, go brush your teeth, demand. Even when my mom was like, hey, how was school? Going to school was a demand. Going to dance afterwards. I quit like every single activity that I did, but I wanted to do them so bad. It's just that I couldn't when I got there or before going. Today that looks like working, which is great, because just like work and capitalism in general does not feel autonomous. When I've gotten really depressed and low, living can feel like a demand. Eating, showering, vacuuming, doing laundry.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Paige is talking about like the more sort of introspective aspect of it. I think that's one of the main reasons that I struggle always sticking to the routine that I've set myself, because I am somewhat putting an expectation on myself, on my future self, you know, and I just have this gut feeling inside that's saying, right, I know that I've got to do this, and I don't particularly want to, even though I told myself that I was going to do this. Interesting. Do you think that PDA causes selective mutism, the demand and anxiety that comes with expectation to speak? I think you make a valid point, actually. That's quite an interesting crossover. You know, I definitely do experience selective mutism. I think there's another term for it that within the autistic community as well, because selective kind of predetermines that you are like choosing what to be mute about, which is not necessarily how it works. I can imagine that if you are bombarded with demands as a PDA person, that you might be more sort of, you know, perhaps going to shut down a little bit more, which often comes with aspects of selective mutism. Sweet and Tender Hooligan says, I thought it was pretty lame for her to insert her own definition of PDA. Clinical terms are not an attack. We are not that fragile that we can't handle acronyms. What acronyms actually mean, right? I wouldn't say that it's necessarily lame. I think if it helps the person who has PDA to if they want to reframe it, I don't see any problem with that. I don't think it's necessarily an attack. I understand where you're coming from. I do. It's kind of the same thing with autism for me. It's like I have guiding principles when it comes to certain things. That there are certain things that I believe in strongly, which is identity first language versus person first language. But then again, if someone was to come across them and they wanted me to call them, say that they had autism, or that, you know, I don't know, like Matthew has autism, you know, instead of autistic Matthew, I would be respectful of that. I don't mind referring to it as PDA, as pathological demand avoidance, because I don't feel the need to, but if someone does, and they prefer a certain term, I don't see anything wrong with that.
I mean, that kind of does in the day-to-day, but there's some times when that just felt like so fucking rude, you know, that I'm like, how dare I? Like, who is making me do this right now? That I don't want to do any of this stuff. But even though rationally I do. I know the consequences. I don't want the consequences. I love having a clean house. I love being clean. I know all of these things. Sleeping. Love sleeping. I was an insomniac since I was a little kid because sleep is a demand. Text message is a demand. Poems, quotes used to be a big demand for me. Signs, anyone advertising, any advertisement. PDA people are also really good at sniffing out.
Oh man, that is also something that I have sort of experienced. Advertisements, they get on my nerves so much, saying, come join us for the best experience in 2023. Grab your lunchbox and your whatever and your picnic mat and come over and head over to this place at this time. I'm like, don't tell me what to do, advert. Who do you think you are? I think what Paige is probably going to go on to is like sniffing out like advertisement strategies, because I like to think that I'm quite resistant to the effects of advertisements. If stuff does seem to be like right, then I will obviously like buy something if it's advertised. But there's a lot of things that are advertised. I'm like, oh man, I do actually want to go see this, but now that you're telling me to do it, no, I don't want to.
When someone's trying to sell you something, or when there's an ulterior motive, or when someone's trying to make you feel a way, they're trying to influence you in a way that makes it so you're being
100%.
controlled. Someone's trying to control you in a way, manipulate you in a way, not autonomous. And I can smell that bullshit from a mile away. Not
100%.
doing it. So what are some ways to help PDA? Obviously, it's going to be very, very different for everybody. And I recommend that if this is you or if this is your loved one, don't listen to anybody specifically. Listen, take a listen to everybody, and then focus on your kid or on yourself, on your person, and see the patterns. Write them down. See the patterns of what's going on, and maybe you can start to identify the triggers. Questions, suggestions can be a trigger. So even initiating something with a PDAer may be seen as a demand. There are a lot of just language shifts that you can use. So instead of like asking a question, for example, just like using statements of things that are real and exist, and then letting that PDAer go from there and make their own choices. So instead of like, what do you want to eat for dinner? Be like, we have peas and we have carrots. Whenever I babysat, I would never ask the kids like, do you want milk? I know you don't want milk. I'd be like, are we drinking milk from the red cup or the blue cup today? And they're like, the blue one. That's just because that's how my brain works, and so that's how I work. I would recommend living as low demand of a lifestyle as possible. So what that looks like is not having any obligations if you can help it. Or when you do set those obligations, setting that boundary to know, like, I may cancel this and I may change this. As a dance teacher of all ages, there are a lot of neurodivergent kids in dance, and there are PDAers, and dance is a very triggering thing for a PDAer. It was for me when I was little. I quit.
I find like martial arts was quite triggering for me. I kind of liked like some aspects of like discipline and a hierarchy, I guess, within like martial arts places, but I used to just absolutely work myself to the bone every single session. Obviously there is an aspect of me wanting to be the best that I could be. There is also an aspect of not wanting to be told to work harder. That is one of the biggest driving factors for me, like pushing myself very, very hard. I don't want to be told that I'm not doing enough. So if I'm training, like I'm just sweating buckets, I'm like doing as much as I can. I'm taking all the exercises and the warm-ups really seriously, just so that I can avoid being told what to do. Hypothetically, the best thing invented is an ad blocker, 100%. Matthias says, So less obligations, less stress, more happiness. Yeah, I guess so. I think there's a line to it. I mean, I can imagine that with Paige's work nowadays, that they can be a little bit more autonomous than perhaps someone who, you know, works for a company, an organization, a business. I think there is an aspect of like trying to craft a life that's better for you. But there is also an aspect of being like, okay, I'm going to have to tolerate some demand-like things and expectations sometimes. Trying to regulate yourself when you do receive these demands, I think, is also a very, very good way to go about it. The best outcome would be to never have demands, but that's not a world that we live in. And even our body demands stuff of ourselves. You know, I imagine that there's many of you out there who have got into really, really intense hyper-focusing streaks of just like, either whether it's like a TV show that you've just watched from start to finish in the matter of an entire day, or trying to think of some relatable things, or working on a project, or like trying to understand some concept, some subject that you found interesting. You know, anything that's those long stints of things. Like sometimes even your bodily needs can feel like a demand. It's like, right, I know that I need to drink, but if I drink, then it means that I've got to go to the toilet. And if I go to the toilet, I'm out of my hyperfocus like area. It's kind of like a demand that your body's placing on you. Let's continue.
I quit dance because it's a demand. It's something you have to do. And even though these kids love it, I know they do, it's stressful. I try to offer my classes to those kids. I'm like, it's optional. You know, you don't have to do it. You don't have to be here. This is just a thing that you can do. I'm here regardless. You can just come have a seat, or you don't have to come to class sometimes. Parents, of course, would love their kid to come to class all the time, but if your kid's coming to class and just crying the whole time, you're losing your money anyway. Might as well put your money into it and say, like, this is now an accommodation for my child's nervous system, and we can go when they decide to. A lot of PDA kids require a lot of care and attention and a stable nervous system. And so if they're freaking out and yelling at you, then you are probably their safe nervous system. So good job. Are any of you guys PDA, and do you already know?
Yeah. I mean, you definitely feel a lot more safer to have outbursts around people that you feel safe with. And like, I was a taekwondo coach for an amount of time. And whenever there was like an autistic kid that was wanting to sort of join, I was like there, like I used to help a little bit with integrating them. They found the demands from the coaches very difficult. Basically, what we did with the arrangement was that they would do the exercises or do the training that they wanted at the side, and you know, after a while, they did start to integrate a little bit more. I mean, martial arts, I think, is probably like the dojos and the culture around it. I feel like it's a very sort of triggering place for someone with PDA.
Already know it? If so, let me know what is demanding to you. Like something else that's a demand. I'll tell you something else. Menus. I cannot read menus. I get weird about menus. And I'm hyperlexic. I look at menus and I'm like, ah! Anyway, cool. Thanks for being here. I'll talk more about some PDA things later, but I can't wait to hear from you guys and see what you think, and if you guys have any prior knowledge and or experience, because I don't have too much. I'm just getting into it now, and I'm really happy to finally be learning about something that is freaking life-changing to me. Anyway, this is me filming on TikTok. Sayonara. Oh, like, subscribe, and make sure that you yell at me in the comments below before you leave. This is the end of the video song. This video's to tell you the video's done. If you're hearing this, it's because the video's done. Go watch another one. Boop, boop. Have a good day. Love you so much. Bye.
Very interesting. That was PDA, Autism Explained, a closer look at pathological demand avoidance. Or was it persistent drive for autonomy? Some people might mention that. Wasn't it I'm Autistic Now What? Has done like quite a few videos on PDA. We'll have to watch one of those again in our next stream. 100%.